The Venezuelan public has just voted to declare their claim on 62% of Guyana's territory, a whole nother country. A referendum was held to gauge the Venezuelan public's opinion and decide whether or not they should annex the Essequibo region of Guyana, which means we could have another invasion and war on our hands, because that's just normal now. But why is Venezuela doing this? Can Venezuela do this? And what does it mean for the globe and, most importantly, the people of Guyana? This is Marco, you're watching How Countries Work, and today we'll be breaking down exactly what's happening in Guyana. First of all, what and where is Essequibo? In the heart of the South American continent, where the Essequibo River winds its way through Guyana's sprawling landscapes, a tale of geopolitical upheaval and economic transformation is unfolding. Essequibo is a region located west of the Essequibo River in Guyana, South America. The region is vast, covering approximately 160,000 square kilometers, and it constitutes about 62% of Guyana's total territory, and its population of 125,000 is 1/5 of Guyana's total. The catalyst of these grim events lies beneath the ocean's depths, over a resource that can alter the fate of nations: oil. The current issue begins in May 2015, when oil behemoth ExxonMobil discovered more than 295 feet of high-quality oil-bearing sandstone reservoirs. This marked the genesis of Guyana's oil narrative. But it didn't stop there. In January 2017, ExxonMobil uncovered a further 95 feet of high-quality reservoirs. This was followed in March 2017 with another 82-foot bounty of oil-bearing sandstone. And more reservoirs are being discovered all the time. With all these discoveries, Guyana has proven reserves of more than 11 billion barrels of oil and gas in the Starboak Block. This puts Guyana in the top 20 countries in terms of oil potential, more or less equating to other countries like Brazil, Norway, and Algeria. Guyana is expected to produce 600,000 barrels of oil per day by the end of this year, and by 2027, the country is expected to produce 1.3 million barrels of oil per day. It's expected that this could add $16 billion to the Guyana government's pockets by the 2030s. This is crazy for a country of just 800,000 people and would radically transform the economic future of the country. And these effects are already taking place. Oil production used to be 2% of the country's economy in 2019. Now, a few short years later, it's 60%. And according to the IMF, Guyana's 2023 GDP per capita will be $20,500, or already 3 times greater than the $6,500 it recorded for 2019 when oil production commenced. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal. The discovery of oil, one after the other, has garnered the attention of regional and global powers. And so we have today's crisis, where Venezuela actively plans to invade Guyana, laying claim to the entire Essequibo region, and as a result, the money. But why does Venezuela claim Essequibo? In fact, the claims of Venezuela over this territory aren't new. This dispute over Essequibo has deep historical roots going back 120 years and revolves around conflicting territorial claims between Guyana and Venezuela. Controversy traces back to the 19th century when an international arbitration tribunal ruled on the border between the two countries in 1899. The ruling favored Guyana and determined the current territorial boundaries. Now, at the time, Guyana was still under British colonial rule. However, Venezuela has never accepted this ruling and to this day claims the Essequibo region. They have consistently contested the validity of this decision, arguing that collusion between British and Russian judges, along with 2 American judges, invalidates the ruling. From Venezuela's perspective, how could the colonizers themselves decide the borders of Venezuela? I mean, they were obviously going to ensure their own gains in the process, right? Now, while there is some substantiation for these collusion claims, the long-standing 1899 decision has not been conclusively invalidated, especially since Guyana gained its independence from the United Kingdom as a dominion in May 1966 and became a republic in February 1970. However, with the establishment of this independent state, the territorial dispute has not subsided, which is why the Geneva Agreement of 1966 was established to address the land boundary issue, emphasizing a negotiated settlement and resorting to legal action only if negotiations failed. And guess what? Negotiations failed. Despite this agreement, tensions have persisted, and in 2018, the United Nations Secretary General referred the matter to the International Court of Justice, or ICJ, after acknowledging that attempts at a negotiated settlement had indeed failed. And the dispute now involves themselves higher stakes when you consider that Essequibo is now known to hold immense strategic importance due to its rich natural resources. Oil, of course, but also natural gas, gold, diamond, and bauxite. To summarize the roots of this conflict, the discovery of these substantial oil reserves off Guyana's coast from 2015 onwards fall under Guyana's territorial waters, near the disputed Essequibo region, but Venezuela has long since claimed this land, and if it were to gain control over this region, it would inevitably have access to the rich oil reserves. And these reserves are so vast that it can alter the fate of nations, estimated to be the biggest oil reserves per capita in the world. Therefore, as per the latest news, Venezuela plans to invade and gain control over this territory. Just great. Now, it must be mentioned here that President Maduro of Venezuela has been the incumbent since 2013 after the death of his predecessor, Hugo Chavez. He is a socialist nationalist who claims to fight for his people, especially the working class, while rejecting external interventions in governance. The fact that he is openly against American imperialism in Latin America makes him unpopular among the international community. However, the reason behind his plans of invasion seems to be multifold. Number one, he has failed to uplift the country's economy. Two, he has to save his political career as president. And three, the riches of Essequibo are too many to ignore. Venezuela has been suffering an economic crisis for years that President Maduro has so far been unsuccessful in alleviating. It is facing a severe economic and social crisis, hyperinflation, food shortages, power outages, and political unrest, to name a few. President Maduro may be using the territorial claim as a way to rally nationalist support and divert attention from these domestic problems. He may also be trying to undermine the legitimacy of the opposition leader in the upcoming Venezuelan elections of 2024. Gaining access to Guyana's wealth would be a major talking point for the Maduro government. Also, a crisis situation could also be used to postpone the elections themselves, although that will come at a huge price. It's important to mention that Venezuela is already amongst the countries with the largest oil reserves worldwide. In 2008, Venezuela reportedly produced 3.1 million barrels of oil daily and exported 2.4 million of those barrels per day. However, Venezuela's oil production has plummeted in the past decade, dipping to only around 730,000 barrels per day in 2022. As per Statista, this represents less than 1/3 of the country's production in 2008. This shows why Guyana's oil reserves look like hitting a refresh button to the Venezuelan oil economy. President Maduro, grappling with economic turmoil and this declining oil production, eyes Essequibo as a lifeline not just for recovery of the economy, but of course, of his time in power. The potential windfall from controlling Guyana's offshore petroleum reserves could offer a significant boost to President Maduro's regime. A geopolitical dynamic shift and regional powers vie for control, the dispute becomes a microcosm of global energy politics. Therefore, to legitimize and politicize the possible invasion of Essequibo by Venezuela, President Maduro came up with this great idea, supposed to hit two birds with one stone. His government decided to hold a referendum to allow the Venezuelan public themselves to decide whether they claim the Essequibo region or not. As mentioned earlier, the International Court of Justice is already involved in the settlement of the dispute. However, Maduro looks to the referendum as a way of regaining popularity and to legitimize the potential invasion. According to one expert, the referendum serves as a rallying point amid economic challenges, offering a diversionary tactic and common cause for both the government and the opposition. This was Maduro's way of not only gaining more popularity, but of saying to the international community that, look, all my people say that Essequibo was ours, and they do not believe that the international court's decision is justified. Also important to note that Venezuela has a far superior military than Guyana. In a hypothetical territorial conflict, Venezuela possesses a substantial military advantage over Guyana. In fact, its active military force is 36 times bigger than Guyana's. While Guyana has around 3,000 military personnel only, Venezuela boasts a much larger force of 123,000 troops. This includes a variety of military assets, such as main battle tanks, reconnaissance vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and heavy rocket artillery systems, providing Venezuela with a significant edge in terms of military potential. On the other hand, according to the defense blog, Guyana has 3,400 active military personnel, including 3,000 from the Army, 200 from the Navy, and 200 from the Air Force. Notably absent are heavy weaponry systems, comprehensive air defense systems, and military aviation. So yeah, there's a big gap. This overwhelming difference means there really wouldn't be much of a struggle for Venezuela in case of a conflict. Therefore, the International Court of Justice and international community are involved in maintaining order. It's worth noting that almost no other government or international institution agrees with Venezuela Venezuela here. In the midst of this geopolitical quagmire, the International Court of Justice issued a warning to Venezuela, urging a halt to any actions altering Guyana's control over Essequibo. The court's ruling, though not explicitly barring Venezuela's referendum, underscored the need to maintain the status quo until a final decision is reached. The final decision, however, seems far away, when in reality, the existential threat to Guyana is happening now. The United Nations intervention reflects the global community's concern over the potential ramifications of the dispute. Essequibo's strategic location, coupled with its new economic significance, pose a threat to regional stability. The specter of military aggression looms large, with Venezuela's referendum becoming a potential trigger for conflict. Other countries are also stepping into the tensions. For instance, Brazil has strengthened its own troop presence near the border with Venezuela, saying it is concerned by the climate of tension. Similarly, the United States is stepping into the fray and is being advised to send its troops down to Guyana to save it from an illegal Venezuelan encroachment. The US Ambassador to Guyana, Nicole Thoroit, recently reiterated Washington's stance on the legitimacy of the border, urging Venezuela to respect Guyana's sovereignty. Assistant US Secretary of State Brian Nichols had previously stated recently that any attempts to violate Guyana's sovereignty would not be tolerated. Washington believes that a potential move by Maduro to destabilize the region would present major challenges. Under former President Donald Trump, the US aimed to oust Maduro in 2019, after an election that was widely criticized as fraudulent. It was also amid the crushing economic crisis that led over 7 million Venezuelans to flee to neighboring countries, including the US. So the entire region has stability concerns as well as the refugee issue front of mind. The current Biden administration has also declared the Venezuelan government to be undemocratic. In July, US State Department spokesman Ned Price affirmed this, stating that our stance on Nicolas Maduro remains unchanged. He lacks the legitimacy to lead Venezuela. In 2019, this approach towards Venezuela's government under Maduro even prompted the US to impose sanctions that banned state-run oil company PDVSA from exporting to its chosen markets. The sanctions also restricted the Venezuelan government's access to US debt and equity markets. Only recently, in October 2023, the US eased these sanctions when it was promised that Venezuela would hold free and fair elections in 2024 with international observers present. So what would happen if Venezuela, which lacks US support, invades the Essequibo region? There is a chance that the almighty US military itself would intervene in Essequibo and save it from Venezuela, all while reimposing sanctions on Venezuela, and this time with the support of a much greater portion of the international community, which could potentially be far more crippling than the last round of sanctions. Needless to say, this would be a disastrous scenario for Maduro and could easily lead to the collapse of his government. So, do the Venezuelans really plan to invade Guyana? The Maduro government is trying its best to undermine the decision of the International Court, and he wants to use his military might to take over the rich Essequibo land and waters, which takes us back to the referendum of the 3rd of December 2023. In total, there were 5 questions. The people were asked whether they would want to annex the Essequibo region and give its people Venezuelan citizenship. They were also asked about whether they would respect the International Court's decision. And the results were 95% in favor of annexation, with over 10.5 million votes. Maduro rejoiced and used it to show it as a sign that the majority of the people still support him and his political moves. But wait! There's a twist. The government did not tell whether the 10.5 million votes are from each question or from all the questions put together, which means the government could have just multiplied the 2 million votes they received with a total of 5 answers and used it to manipulate public opinion. Chances are high that such manipulation took place, since most media representatives have reported that people did not show up. Reporters claim that it was just a normal day in Venezuela's capital, Caracas. Even if the referendum results are altered, the fact that it was even held is being seen as a pretext to a land grab. Consequently, international organizations, global powers, and neighbors of Guyana are fearing a military conflict. The International Court's settlement decision of the dispute still seems years away, and the only thing deterring a Venezuelan invasion of Guyana might be possible US interference, which would also open an ideological war front, where Venezuela might turn US interference into an imperialist narrative and thus legitimize a war further. A crucial question to ask in the end is, why is Venezuela taking the risk of a conflict that would most probably bring back sanctions from the USA and the rest of the international community? Why seek a conflict that could worsen its ongoing economic crisis and put the population under further pressure? It's for this reason that many observers think that this is all for show and that Maduro has no plans to invade the region. Remember those 10.5 million votes in the referendum? Well, that's more than Maduro needs to win re-election. Shouldn't this mean that the people will get him into office again? Perhaps this is all just a cynical ploy by a president under immense pressure to rally national support for an upcoming election. Or maybe the newfound wealth of Guyana seems worth the risk. Only time will tell. In conclusion, the situation is turning more complex by the minute, and the world might be at the brink of another war. The more countries interfere and participate, the more narratives appear, and the only victims seem to be the people of the Essequibo region who are caught in the middle of this international conflict. And how about you? What do you think could be a possible and fair solution to the conflict? Is the Venezuelan referendum justified? And should the United States interfere? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for your time. Until the next video.